last 40 years. He has degrees, count these, he has degrees in sociology, psychology, political science, history, and a Juris Doctorate, a JD. He's an attorney. He has enjoyed a varied career, having taught in Omaha Public Schools and at Millard South. He's worked as a mediator and as an attorney for 35 years. For over 20 years, he has worked as a criminal act attorney and has had cases appealed to the Supreme Court and appellate courts on the federal and state level. When Wes first walked in this morning, I asked him to share with me a couple of human interest anecdotes, and after a moment of thought, he said, well, you can tell them that I play the ukulele and the harmonica. Wes is a member of the boards of Common Cause Nebraska, Represent Us Omaha, CW Youth Resource Center, and Better Ballots Nebraska, where he is currently the vice president. Will you please join me in welcoming Wes Dodge?
They asked me if I could bring something to pass around, and right now Better Ballots is trying to promote both of these things that we're talking about today at the Nebraska football game. So we made up some rosters, which doesn't necessarily play into what we're doing today, but if you look at the back side, there's just a little thing that's supposed to get people's interest when we hand these out, and then there's a QR code so you can scan it and get to our Better Ballots webpage if you want to learn more about it. And then just for fun, if you look at the rosters, you don't necessarily have to pour over it today, but we snuck some Easter eggs in there in hopes that while people were looking up people's names, they'd see some things. So I'm going to put these over here, and maybe you can just kind of hand them around as I'm speaking. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I'm fortunate enough to have a daughter that was able to put together this slide deck for me. So, hopefully it's somewhat entertaining. All right, so this is a saying I like. I've seen it attributed to several people, and I think it applies greatly to this group of people here. They use the term men here, but I thought I should quote it the way it originally was. But I always admire people who are willing to work hard for the future, you know, to do things that they'll never see. And I pray that in Nebraska we see ranked choice voting, and we see open primaries, and we see a national election that elects our president instead of the manipulation we've seen. So I think we're all planting trees right now, and I just want to tell you all I appreciate what you're doing, and I hope you'll keep doing the things you're doing. So that gets us to what this is sensitive here. So that gets us to our real problem, which is we've got some things that we need to work on. And so as part of that, what I wanted to say here was, Washington called our democracy the great American experiment. I think a lot of the people that deal with politics and deal with government seem to think we got to a point at some point in time where we were done. And I think that the best philosophy about democracy and government is everything changes all the time. I forget when women's suffrage was exactly, what, 1919, 1920?
Yes, 1920.
So, I mean, you all couldn't vote or most of us couldn't vote at some point in time. You had to be a landowner at the beginning. You had to be a white landowner. Then they opened it up to just men, then women. Then we had the Civil War where blacks got to vote, and then we had Jim Crow that kind of pushed that all back down. So it's an evolution and a process, and that's what we're working on today. And I want to go, as we go over these things, I want you to consider what the purposes of democracy are. So just some definitions, and I'm not going to read everything verbatim, but when you look it up in Oxford, the big thing is it's supposed to be the whole population of eligible members. So we're all supposed to matter. And then when you look at our Declaration of Independence, It's deriving the powers from the consent of the governed. So we're supposed to have the control, not other people. And right now, there's always groups and there's always people that know how to manipulate the system to get power, and they do a great job of it. I mean, they're brilliant, so we have to be brilliant as well. And we have to come up with ways to overcome that. And what we're discussing today, I think, deals with some of those. I was listening to an audiobook as I was driving down here, and it's called Solidarity. And it said that, we have the saying, e pluribus unum, from many one, and it said that's a good thought, but maybe instead of one, we need to use the word whole. It's not like we all become the same thing. I'm not a white woman, and as if we think of it as a whole, we can think of it as a body, like, maybe some of us are hands, some of us are feet, some of us are hearts. So if we can find a way to work together in solidarity, we can be more efficient. And I think some of these remedies deal with that. I'm going to move the gavel here. All right, and then we look at what's going on as far as our democracy is concerned right now. 7 out of 10 Americans right now think our democracy is in peril, and the electorate today is dissatisfied and disconnected. We need to reform it. I drive around as part of my work, going to different places in town, going to different venues to argue cases, etc. And I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of information. And I was listening to a guy from England, and we have a terrible, our electorate doesn't show up to vote, almost worse than almost all the European countries. And when they asked this guy who doesn't live here why that happens, he said he thinks it's the Electoral College. He said when people get up in the morning, if they live in Nebraska or they live in Montana or they live in even California, on November 5th, how much do I matter? Because it's kind of a done deal. So I'll elaborate on that a little more as to what some of these reforms can do to change that. When we were talking about nefarious characters, and that's probably a bad segue into this, but did any of you see what Pillin said yesterday? Did you see it? He said he's still looking at the winner-take-all thing, and he's still considering trying to quickly call a special session to see if we can, do a winner-take-all again. To me, that says, I'm fearful of what the result will be, so I want to make sure that I can control how it's applied. And, I try to be nonpartisan in what I say, but I just think that's an attempted manipulation of the system. Now this next slide, I hope you can see it okay. I stole this from Represent Us, the national organization. And what it shows is the way Congress has cooperated over its history. So if you look in 1967, those black lines are people who vote across the aisle. Republicans that vote on a Democratic supported thing, Democrats that vote for a Republican supported thing. And you don't have to be a genius to see what's happened here. You've got a lot of activity. This is right after the Great Society Act, which was a good moment that brought us all closer together under Johnson. Then you go to 81, we're still in pretty good shape. We got a lot of cooperation going on. 95, I think that's the contract with America, the New Gingrich era we're getting into. And you see that the cooperation has gone away immensely, and then 2011 is pretty much similar. I haven't updated the slide because I don't have the ability with the technology, but it's pretty much similar to what you see in 2011. All right, so then we have, anytime anybody campaigns, they say, I'm gonna fix everything. And they say, I'm gonna go to Washington, I'm gonna make it all right, everything's gonna be fine. Then they go to Washington and they start demonizing the other side. They go with the cultural war things. And they've got to do those things once they get there. So then when we look at the problems, I think the two greatest problems are probably parties and money. I don't know where Kate is here, but Kate, there's our expert on money, and I'm not going to talk about money. But you know, the parties, it's this. You know, what's more important? Is it the party? Is it the country? Is it the whole? You know, is the hand important to the foot, and vice versa? So the parties have different desires, and they want to keep the power. So it's like, what can we do to deal with that? And I know so many quotes and everything. I try not to say them all, but you've heard Jefferson say, if I were to go to heaven, but with the party, I would not go. Have you heard that one? So I think that kind of tells what it's been. And Washington's farewell address, you know, one of the greatest evils is parties. So some of these things deal with that. One other thing is I like, when I say too much bundling, I read a book called Vexed. Have you read it? It's a boring book. But the one thing that I really liked in it, again, written from somebody from Europe, but they said one of the problems they see in the United States is bundling. So if I'm a Democrat, I have to be pro-choice, and you know, in Nebraska, Ben Nelson was pro-life, anti-death penalty, you know what I mean? But he was a Democrat. And they're not letting people be that kind of person anymore. You have to be one of the bifurcated, I'm all the way right or I'm all the way left. And so the bundling, according to the person who wrote Vexed, is a huge problem. Then we've got, I prepared this originally for the Free Speech Society and kind of modified it, but we're considered to be a failing democracy now. When I wrote these slides up about a year and a half ago, we were 26th, you know, where they ranked them from best to worst, and now we're 36th. We dropped another 10 places. And we went from being a functioning democracy to we're on the first level of, we're the very first at-risk democracy now, according to their rating system.
Who's the number one democracy?
Pardon?
Who's the number one?
I think it's Finland. I could be wrong. If you look at it, the top four are like Scandinavian countries, Finland, Norway, and we don't have time to talk about it. You talked about it earlier, but they tend to use proportional representation systems in their governments. But the thing that struck me as I was looking at it, we are ranked lower than Germany, Italy, and Japan. So those were the three countries we were fighting to stop fascism and authoritarianism in the world, and now we're considered a worse democracy than they are. And if you look at the countries that are around us in the rankings, it's Slovenia and Malta and some country, you know, a lot of these countries you don't even think about. Okay, so this kind of gets back to that other slide. If we can kind of make things competitive, then maybe good things can happen. This looks at Congress and competitive races. So in 1980, we had 143 seats that were competitive. In 2000, we had 86 seats that were competitive. And in 2020, we had 16 seats that were competitive. So we're just barely sliding back and forth in that 16. I did update it. There, 2024, I looked it up. It depends on how you use it. 24 right now are considered, they would fit into that hard competitive. It goes up to 42 if you use the leans left or leans right criteria. So it's improved a little bit there, but it's still not great. And then we look at the number of people who register in various ways with the different parties. These are 22 numbers, and they've changed a little bit in Nebraska, but not a lot. But it always strikes me, you know, we're kind of a hard red Republican state, but we don't have a majority of our population as Republicans. And because of what we're talking about today, I'd even re-registered. I'm a Lindstrom Republican right now, I guess, because I felt like my vote didn't matter because whatever was gonna happen on the Democratic side was gonna happen. So if I wanted my vote to matter, I needed to re-register as a Republican, because the Republican Party said, we're not gonna let you vote on the governor. So I figured I might as well try to get somebody who's reasonable. And, sorry. and I saw Lindstrom speak at the Free Speech Society, and this will get into what we talk about in just a minute, but he said they'd taken polling, and he was a second choice of almost every Republican. So they either wanted Herbster or they wanted Pillen, but almost everybody wanted Lindstrom number 2. So if we used I wanted to stand up and yell, but I didn't want to interrupt the meeting, but if we'd used a ranked choice system, Lindstrom would have very likely been our Republican nominee. And I think that gets us to moderation. I don't know how many of you have heard him talk. He's a very reasonable man. When he talks about taxes, he talks about buckets. We can only get money from this place and this place. He really knows what's going on. But he now works as a consultant where my wife works. The national number, old numbers, but I've looked them up. Now, nationally, there's still less than 50% as nonpartisans, but when they're asked the question, how do you really feel, because they have to register as a Republican or a Democrat, they identify as a nonpartisan, and for the first time ever, we're over 50% on that number. So that I just heard like last week, which again means right now we've got the parties controlling the system. So how can we work on these things? They said please talk about ranked choice voting and the National Interstate Popular Vote Compact, which I'm going to do. But if you notice on this handout, the first thing we put was open primaries at the top. Some of you, I'm sure, are involved with various processes that are going on right now, and maybe you're not, I don't know, but the open primaries is the thing that has the juice right now and some of the money behind it. So we were this close to getting open primaries on the ballot this time around, and it wasn't about not having people interested in it, but unfortunately it was about the money. We got to get $1 million, $1.2 million to get the votes. And I'm disappointed because I think we're going to have a really good turnout in November, and it would have been fantastic to have open primaries on the ballot, but you can't fix what already is. But the works are there. There's something called Open Primaries Nebraska. I think if you Google it, you might find it. There's some people working on that. I forget his name. He's the mayor of Norfolk, is the head of it. Yeah. So you could get with him. I don't think they necessarily have the money, but I think there's an angel out there somewhere that someday might push that, hopefully within the next 2 years. So keep that in mind. Tell your friends that we need to start working on these kinds of things.
I just want to say Josh would be a great governor.
I know people around him, and I've called him. Tell him to return my phone calls when I call him. If you talk to him.
Do you mind a quick question now?
Sure.
What would you see as the effect of open primaries? What would that do?
And that's what we're going to do right now. No, and I appreciate it. Good question. And then we'll ask some more at the end. And there's going to be some overlap. I feel like I'm being somewhat redundant when I talk about open primaries and I talk about ranked choice voting, because we do have overlap in the way these things work. So open primaries encourages greater turnout. So wherever they use it, the number of voters goes up, because you wake up in the morning and it's, do I matter? Do I have to re-register to be a Republican to feel like I matter? You don't have to do that where you have open primaries. It causes the people that run to think, oh my gosh, I don't have to just make that 22% on the far right or that 22% on the far left like me. I have to make those people that are going to ask for the other ballot like me. So that tends to moderate people, makes them start governing more from the middle. Another quote that isn't here, I loved it, when Eisenhower said that on both sides of the road, you have the far right and the far left of the road, you have the gutters. And in the middle, that's where you make progress. So, yeah, I thought that was a great quote, and it applies here. So it creates more participation. All voters can participate. This previous slide, you know, a third of Nebraskans are kind of automatically not able to vote for much. You know, if you're an independent or your marijuana party or you name it, a libertarian, those kinds of things, it's like you don't, you know, here's your ballot. Now, I talked to people that are registered that way. They said, I had a ballot and it had like 2 things, you know, and it was something that I didn't know that much about. Okay, and then I've already mentioned this, but I just wanted to stress that this is the party power. The last gubernatorial election during the primaries, the Republicans said, we're not going to let independents ask for the Republican ballot, which is what got into what I discussed. All right, so then, I've already said this, you don't have to be registered in a specific party to vote. And then what I wanted to add here was, I mean, in essence, it allows you to be an independent. It allows you to be a Ben Nelson type of person that you don't have to bundle. You can say, I feel this way about choice. I feel this way about the death penalty. You know, you can be a different. Everybody doesn't have to fit into this category and check these boxes in order to be a relevant candidate. So we've already addressed it when you ask what happens. It's the moderation. And spell check changed one of my words there. I hope it doesn't. Oh, I'm on the wrong. Sorry, I'm on the wrong. I don't know what happened here. All right. Well, I'll just move on to this. I don't know what I got going on here. It does. What I will say though is, when you have open primaries and you have ranked choice voting, and it's a whole nother topic, and we're going to be working on this in some other realms. But gerrymandering very quickly. If you adopt these 2 things, that greatly reduces gerrymandering, especially ranked choice voting. Because in gerrymandering, they're just moving the boundaries around. Who can I get here, carve out here to just get that 3 or 4% change where I can take over. I don't know if any of you have ever gone to the American Democracy Summit, but I would highly recommend that if somebody from this organization could go, you go. They have it every 2 years. And it's 2 days, and it's amazingly intelligent people about all of these things. I went to it, and there was these nerdy techie guys there, and it was funny because they were kind of amoral, but they were interesting. But kind of the Elon Musk Teal kind of philosophy. And so they sat there in front of us, and they said, "I can sit here and press buttons on my computer, and I know what you bought at Amazon, and I know what kind of car you drive, and I know what you subscribe to, and I can talk to political people, and I can look at these maps, and I can draw these maps, and I can make like 4 different things happen." And it's just scary. It's scary, it's interesting, it's important that we know that. So I've kind of digressed there, but that technology, that knowledge is there. I tend to do this. I'm going to digress very quickly. Another thing that kind of is a really interesting thing, another group talked, and I don't know if you've ever heard about it, but as far as manipulating us with media, they created a riot in Austin where I think it might have been a Black Lives Matter thing or something like that, but people showed up at the Austin Capitol to support it, and then the anti-protesters showed up, and they had a confrontation, and when they dug deep down into social media, they found out nobody in Austin had done anything to start that. It came from Iran. So they pretended they were Austonians, is that the proper term? and they created a riot from a foreign country. So we need to be very aware of that. And like I said, I'm digressing. We need to have some legislation. We need to look more at what Europe is doing there. Okay, so, there's my slide that I thought I was on. Okay, so this is where open primaries is huge. Anybody know Senator Lowe?
Yeah.
Okay, this is I'm telling a little Senator Lowe story. It'll be short, but In California, in 2010, they did not have open primaries. They use almost like our legislative system. They have open primaries. You can have 2 Republicans run. You can have 2 Democrats run against each other. They did not have that before 2010. And Californians, that's the approval rating. 17% of Californians like their legislature. And I got this from, I think it's called the policy, I'll remember it. It's the political industry or the politics industry, great book. So then they adopted the open primaries. So post open primaries, now there's a 75% approval rating of their legislature in California. That kind of catches that period. Remember where they're joking about California being bankrupt all the time and how bad they were doing and all that? Now, you know, they've kind of gotten it together because they've been forced to moderate because of open primaries. Alaska, this is where we're overlapping a little bit, but it's still the open primary system. They've had a lot higher voter approval everywhere, and again, I'm jumping ahead to the next thing here a little bit, but everywhere ranked choice voting is used, people like it. It's got over a 60% approval rating in New York. It's kind of weird when the mayor is kind of a mess right now, but
Yeah.
but the approval rating of the people that voted, they felt it was important, and they were very happy with what had happened there. People always bring up Alaska, and they say the people that don't like ranked choice voting talk about the fact that Sarah Palin was kind of run out or something like that. If we use a first past the post system, if my podium was flat, I wouldn't have to walk over here. But if we used a first past the post system, we would have still had the same result because Palin did not, you know, they know the numbers from the first round, and she did not win the first round. Paletta, is that her name? The one that won? Yeah, she won the first round, and ultimately she won over 50%. First native born, oh, thank you. First native born Alaskan to get to serve, you know, she has indigenous roots. Fun thing, just because I have to say these things because I'm an ex-teacher, but her dad was from Gothenburg, Nebraska. So I like to, you know, Nebraska, Alaska, that's kind of cool. And then when they complain about it and say it was kind of a Democratic takeover, the Republicans had more seats in the state legislature on the same ballot. So they increased by a couple of seats, and then some of the people that were supported by the Republican Party lost, but a Republican still won. You know, so the Republicans said we want this guy or the gal, and number two that more people like the more moderate person. So that kind of shows how that stuff can work, and that's. Alaska uses the open primary system with ranked choice voting. I love this, especially since we have another, budget battle going on. Where open primaries are used, 65% of Republicans in closed primary states voted for the shutdowns. 95% of Republicans in open primary states voted against them. So I just think that of all the things you can look at, that really, to me, tells the story. You know, shoot, if I shut down the government, I'm going to have hell to pay back in my district. But if you got enough far-right types that are kind of saying burn everything down, I'm going to be okay. All right, ranked choice voting. I wish that image was better. But we're making the shift from open primaries to ranked choice voting. And if you have questions at the end for some differentiation, we can talk about that. This is, if anybody asks you how to define it, it's on our website, but you probably you could take a picture of this or whatever, and they say, what is ranked choice voting? I've tried to do the best I can to break it down so someone can understand it. As a voter, you have the ability to rank candidates in the order of preference, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. Most places that use it, they either use 4 or 5, and I'm indifferent to that. I like 5. It just seems like the more the better. If a candidate wins more than 50% in the first round, they win, just like now. If they don't win the most, Then let's say 15 people run, number 15 falls off, and all their second place votes are reallocated, and that keeps happening, keep working from the bottom up, meaning the person whose last votes are redistributed, until you have a 50% winner plus one vote. You know, so to make it really simple, you know, if there's 40 people in a state, when you get to 21, you have a winner.
Where are those votes distributed, to the high one?
If you, the example I like to use, and I think, you know, people got upset during the Democratic primary when Hillary won. The Bernie people got mad. So the Bernie people could have voted for Bernie, and then, I don't know, who's another Democrat that didn't, who were...
Elizabeth Warren?
Yeah, so let's say Elizabeth Warren is last place, her votes fall out, and then whoever her people voted second, if it was Hillary or Bernie or whatever, that's redistributed up to those people. And then when you get 50% plus one. Another question, I'll go ahead and answer it ahead of time because it's something who really pushed back against this, say it's overly complicated, we can't do it. When you put it out in front of you, like that first image, it's not that hard, you know. If we all wanted to order pizza and we handed you out a thing to pepperoni, cheese, hamburger, you know, or anchovies, and then you have people rank choice, and we come up with what a majority of us can still tolerate, even though it's our second or third choice.
Australia's been doing it for years.
Actually, doing some studying about George Norris, and I didn't know this, but our unicameral is kind of rooted in him visiting Australia and New Zealand in the mid-20s. So, yes. And by the way, Australia and New Zealand are ranked higher than us in the pro-democracy categories as well. And yeah, at some point we decided we were geniuses because we had all the right answers and nobody else did, and it's like Locke and Hobbes and Rousseau, and they're not Americans. You know, we can learn things from other people in other places and apply them. I think that's how the system's supposed to go. But anyway, I think I stopped myself before I was going to say, I talked to election ECC, that we've got Dominion and election systems.
Yes.
Election systems does ours. I called them up because I was trying to get them to talk on a Zoom call to talk about things. They won't do it because they think, and it's not bad, they say we don't want to seem political in any way, so we shouldn't be having these. And I said, okay, that makes sense. And I said, but tell me what you can do with this. And they said, it's there. It's all there right now. You know, all we have to do, it's in our software, it's in our machinery. If Nebraska said we're ranked choice voting tomorrow, we could do it. Because we're doing it for the places they are doing it. And I don't think we should necessarily do this, but in, I think it's Scotland, and don't hold me to that, but I think I'm right on that. They turn it into March Madness. They just have a party with it. They, instead of having it all come out at once and say who won, it's like, at this time we're going to show the first round votes. And people meet in bars and they hang out and they wait to watch the ranked choice voting stuff roll through. And there's a certain percentage of the population that likes that philosophy. We can turn it into all-star wrestling, you know, and then that'll get some of that demographic that doesn't seem to like some of these pro-democracy things. Okay, so the positive reduces acrimony and negative campaigning. Minnesota is doing some great things. If somebody needs to tell me to hurry, you go ahead and tell me to hurry if I need to too, by the way. Minnesota passed a really good pro-democracy package of bills. And I'm trying to make noise quietly. I've actually talked to some senators here that said they'll help us. One of them said, if you can get a Republican to help us with some of these bills, I'll get there with you. I did get a Republican. I can't say who or, you know, it's one of those deals that we do. But that person said, if you can do this, this, and this, I can get these people to jump on board. He doesn't have as much as I want. You know, we're not getting ranked choice voting, open primaries, but we're getting some of the dark money stuff and the campaign limit stuff. So anyway, I digress again. Minnesota passed this bill, which has a lot of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act things in it. And there was this lady that ran it all. I can't remember her name. I wish I could remember her name right now. But when she was interviewed, they said, this is amazing. You managed to get this done. And she said, we've been working on this for 15 years. It's kind of like the overnight one hit wonder, you know, I've been a band for 15 years. And And, but one of the candidates said that one of the biggest things I do now is I knock on the door of a house with someone else's sign in the front yard. And I walk up and I say, why is it you like them? And I find out what it is and say, okay, I support this, this, and this, and they do too. We at least consider me as your number 2. And so they care. They care about that number 2. So that's hugely important. And another thing that's happened is in some of these jurisdictions with ranked choice voting, people campaign together. 2 or 3 candidates will meet and have a rally and say, I want to be it, but if it's not me, these 2 people are close to my philosophy, so pick one of us, because we all support each other. To me, that's more the whole versus the we're all separate and we got. It's not the us versus them. It brings us more to the us rather than the who's evil and who's not. Where ranked choice voting is used, and I think this is important, especially for this audience, and I don't mean that, I mean that in the best possible way, but New York City, you know, even though I've made the joke about the mayor not being great, for the first time in its history has a majority council of women. First time ever using ranked choice voting. Prior to ranked choice voting, I looked up the statistics at fairvote.org or com. Prior to it, 27% of the council was women. After, 61%. And wherever ranked choice voting is used, women get more seats, women win more, and minorities win more. And people who are thinking about running, run. You know, it's like, oh man, I can't run. If I run, we're going to divide the Republican vote. If I run, we're going to divide the Democratic vote, and the other person's going to win. If you run under ranked choice voting, you can all run, and some 27-year-old can run, and maybe the other person wins, but we all learn about the 27-year-old, and maybe they're a good person down the line.
So I'm just thinking about this, and it occurs to me that if ranked choice voting is adopted, people are going to try to figure out how to game the system. And if I'm a wealthy candidate, but I'm not quite as popular as the leading candidate, I might seek to fund a clone of the leading candidate. Let's call him RFK, and you know, just random initials, and then try to split the vote for the leading candidate so that I come out number 1. Isn't the system vulnerable to that?
Maybe, but you got to get over 50%. If you get over 50%, you're the winner anyway, right? And if you don't get over 50%, RFK is gone. RFK Jr. is gone.
Oh, I didn't say junior.
There's a big difference.
Yeah. That was actually my first campaign that I worked in.
I saw a thing. Did you see the thing where they said where he was on and he gave a review of Trump's campaign performance, but at the end he kind of said, but he had some good recipe ideas. Anyway, all right, so positives, this is where it gets a little redundant from what we were saying about open primaries, but it does away with the bundling issues. That's why I brought that up before, because I can have a different view that doesn't fall right in with the party, doesn't fall in with the far right or the far left, and maybe I can still win in the long run. This is something you can sell to your conservatives, your fiscal conservatives. You don't have to do runoff elections. If Georgia had ranked choice voting, can you imagine how much money would have been saved and effort and angst? You know, it would have been amazing. Now, not strangely, media loves us not having it. Because you can watch all those, those black and white with the minor key song in the background saying that somebody's the devil and they're the, have flames in the background and riots and things like that. Or Tony Vargas wants to raise his salary to $24,000 a year. And then, I've already said this, the bottom line is when you're done with a ranked choice voting election, over 50% of the people have voted for the person that serves them. Now, I kind of forget what's on my slides, even though I've gone through them a dozen times. So I'm going to say this. So over 50% of the people know who served them. And when I broke down the numbers from the Ricketts, who do you run again? Bruning? Was it Ricketts Bruning?
I think so.
Yeah. And about 22%, I hope this slide isn't coming up, I don't know if I'm working from the top of my head. About 22% of the registered Republicans voted in that primary. And Ricketts won 30-some% of that vote, like 33% of the vote. So then I pulled up the numbers of all the registered voters. And so in the primary, Ricketts won, I think, barely over 10% of the registered voters. You know, if you count all the registered votes. So in essence, once they win that primary, they're gonna win. I mean, unless we're in the Kerry Nelson era again, which maybe we'll get back to, who knows. But so that's why all the money could be poured into the primaries. That's why we want to suppress votes. That's why we want people not interested. That's why we want people to feel defeated. Because then the motivated people, the pitchfork people and the torches, you know, and whatever, on both sides, if you get over 10% of them, you're going to win in a hard blue or a hard red state. So the primaries are it. So ranked choice voting, especially if we can open it up. Some states use ranked choice voting for the various sides. You know, the Republicans do their ranked choice and otherwise. Strangely, some of the southern states, Alabama, Mississippi, I know those two for sure. I think there's two others. They use ranked choice voting for overseas military people. So even though they don't use it for anything else, if you're in the military, you use ranked choice voting. So it seems like if you're using it for that, you should be able to go ahead and use it otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the bottom line, even though we said over 50% win, voter satisfaction is high. When the election's over, you don't have, here, sometimes when one of these people who gets like 20-30% of the vote in the primary and then wins the governorship or whatever, I think well over half the population kind of goes, here we go. They're going to have 4 years of fun. Are you just saying you're one of those people?
Is there a constitutional requirement that the government conduct primary elections?
Yes, that's actually coming up on a slide here. Which is great. It makes me feel good about maybe doing my job right. So now we're going to get into the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And whoops, I must have hit 2 buttons. Okay, no. So right now they say 7. Some people are saying 6. People argue about whether North Carolina is one of the states that's in play or not. But right now, these 7 states will potentially elect our president. And it depends on how you do in those states. So Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, Arizona, and the blue dot is important. Yeah. So, and thus Pillen's statement yesterday, because it's still in play. Popular vote in these states, this is your Robert F. Kennedy Jr. statement. Did you see where he's filed lawsuits to get his name removed from various ballots? And North Carolina has to reprint their ballots, I think, as of yesterday or the day before. So they spent millions of dollars printing ballots with his name on them, and I think a right-leaning Supreme Court said, nope, you got to print them again, you got to take his name off. So we're going to get into some of that nuance of how important that is. And it's funny because he filed lawsuits to get on originally, and now he's filing lawsuits to get off. Ranked choice voting, no litigation. One person, one vote. This gets into, well, we're not there yet, but in 2016, 78,000 votes in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania determined our president. Fair Vote did the math, and it said that means that if you lived in that state, your vote was 36 times more important than any other vote in the country. In 2000, 600 votes, somebody knows the real number, I think it's 547 or something like that. That's Bush and Gore. That many votes changed the election, so you had 1,000 times more power in Florida than you do in any other state. In 2020, 20,000 people picked Biden in Arizona, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Those 3 states with that fine line caused Biden to win 329 times more important. So I hope nobody calls me out on the math. I'm just trusting Fair Vote's math. It's drawn from their website. And then we got the judges can decide elections even when the national choice is clear. What did Biden win by? 8,000? 8 million, I mean? Is that what it was? But look at all the lawsuits. You know, we're going to try to throw out the votes in Arizona. We're going to try to throw out the votes in Wisconsin or Michigan or whatever. And so now they have a term. I added this 2 days ago onto this slide. I heard it. It's called margin of litigation. So when the votes come in, the pundits and the people that advise the parties say, are we within the margin of litigation? So it's like if it's too much of a win, then we can't go to court because we're for sure not going to win. But if it's close enough and we can go there and we can figure out how to get 15,000 votes taken away, we can win that state, which will give us the presidency, even though 8 million more people voted for the other person. So let's try to get away from the margin of litigation. I'm an attorney. I don't want people doing that. I don't care. So, one person, one vote. Did I switch it? Yes. So, oh, that's the same thing here. So then I just put this map up here because I just think it's kind of interesting to look at the visual. You know, this is where it matters. And when I talked about getting up in the morning and feeling like, do I matter? If you get up in the morning and you're in one of those white states, you don't feel like voting. If you're an average Joe, I'm sure you guys all vote. I've been voting since I was 18 and I'm 64. So I'm one of those weird ones. I got a postcard once that said 0% of the population has voted more than you have. It was one of those solicitation things. Okay. One thing I saw as I was looking at this, in 38 states in this year, they're not taking polling. They don't poll for the presidential race, and they don't visit. Yeah. So how many times does a candidate come to Lincoln? I don't know, because I'm not here. I mean, a presidential candidate. Yeah. Too often. They stop by the airport in Omaha. They do a little drive-by. I mean, Walls is a very entertaining, nice person and everything, and he's a Nebraskan. I'm not sure if he just showed up in Omaha right after he was announced if we weren't the blue dot. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's probably what dealt with that. And then I just like this. This is where you get power for being a swing state. 7% of battleground states get more government funding that's determined by the president, and they're 2 times more likely to get disaster relief. And then I got the thing at the bottom that says, do I really matter? I think historically, this is part of our Constitution always growing and improving. I quoted, if you're younger, it's Tupac. If you're older, what is it? Bruce Hornsby, or I don't know who it is, but some things will never change. That's just the way it is. But it's not the way it is. Only 3 states did winner take all before 1800. And I was looking at this slide, and it's a little bit confusing, but they adopted it. So after 1789, when our Constitution was adopted, 3 states said we're going to do winner take all. And then they changed it and said, no, we're not. We're going to divide our electoral votes like Nebraska does now. But then Jefferson and Adams got into a fight. And Virginia said that we're going to go winner take all. And then they supported Jefferson, and then Adams said, oh crap. And then Massachusetts said winner take all. And then everybody jumped on board. So that's where the beginning of the distortion occurred. And then again, it's redundant, but a national electoral vote interstate compact will make every vote matter. I'm going to get to how that happens right now. So the national popular vote interstate compact would guarantee the presidency to the person who won the most votes. And I put democracy in parentheses because I think that's what it is. the consent of the governed, the majority of the people that vote, the electorate get to pick who's in charge. And it would do away with the manipulation of the ballots with the spoiler system with the RFK Juniors. As I was getting ready for this, I was looking into the Nader thing. 547 votes in Florida was the differential. Anybody know how many votes Nader got in Florida that year?
Thousands.
92,000.
Yep.
92,000, like 500 votes. They interviewed Nader people, and 90% of them said if they would have had a second choice or whatever, they were Gore people. So the spoiler effect, and this is where the power comes from for the marginal litigation people and the parties and the oligarchs, the Koch brothers, those people. It's like, can I get into these 7 states? Where can I peel off? I was reading about Trump's has a ceiling of 46%.
Okay.
And they can't seem to get above 46%. If you have a ranked choice voting system, you're not gonna get elected. If 54% of the people will never color in the box next to your name, you're not gonna get elected. But if I can get RFK Jr. to come in and peel away 3 or 4% of those same people, then now I don't have to get, I can win with 46%. I can win by being a first past the post person. And then, Kate, this is your thing at the very bottom. Article 2 of the Constitution gives the state exclusive control over the choice of awarding their electoral votes. And this is also the manipulation that they're trying to do now. There's pending litigation right now in several states where they're trying to implement the ability to just not pay attention to whatever the vote in the state is. 2 of them are real, I mean, they're going up in the next week or 2. Where it's, in essence, it's the alternate electors. Can we just talk to our legislature and say, who are we going to send, instead of following whatever rules they've implemented right now that says whoever wins the most votes in that state wins. Now, this is how it would work. So this kind of gets into how Article 2 says they're going to do it. Each state gets to appoint their electors the way they direct. And when enough states agree to award their electors to the person who wins the popular vote, the compact would be activated. So I guess that was a little rough where I said that. So the Interstate Compact says that, and the next slide has the numbers. Oops, maybe no, it's there. Okay, I'm gonna go back here though, just so I'm in sequence. I like this because this is just the popularity of the concept of whoever gets the most votes wins the presidency. And it's a super majority. 65% of the people interviewed everywhere in the country, if you're asked, would you like the president to be elected by a majority of the people who vote? 2 out of every 3 say yes. And honestly, the more you study politics, you realize there's probably 30% on both sides that don't care what happens as long as it's what I want. I mean, there's authoritarian liberals and there's authoritarian conservatives.
Yeah.
And I think that's the 33%. That's my personal spin on it.
Okay.
But then the way it works here is, right now, 17 states have passed it, and they represent 209 electoral votes. So we're 61 votes away from this becoming law. Every one of those states that has passed that has a clause in it that says when enough states pass this, that it equals 270 electoral votes, this will be implemented. So, and in the states that it hasn't passed in, it's 7 other states it's passed one of the houses: Oklahoma, Arizona, and Nevada. In Nevada, it's passed both houses, but not in the same legislative cycle. And then Arizona, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Oklahoma, and Virginia. I read in Michigan they were like an eyelash away. They were going to do a vote, and that somehow the powers that be were able to cancel the vote the night before it happened.
I lost something when you jumped slides. What is the "it" you're talking about? Where it stands today? What's the "it"?
The compact.
The National Electoral Interstate Compact. That's where we are today. 209 votes. 17 states with 209 votes have passed this legislation.
To say no electoral to eliminate the election.
Yeah. Well, they're not really eliminating it. This is their way of saying we don't have to amend the Constitution.
Right.
So they're saying the states are allowed to dictate how they designate their electoral votes. So they're saying if there's enough states that say we have 270 electoral votes, and those, did I say 70? 270. Then when we have that number of states, then every state that has passed that is going to say it's active now. So even if our state doesn't have a majority that votes for whoever has won the electoral college, otherwise we'll still pass our electoral votes for whoever won the national popular vote. And people often ask, what states does this need to happen? And that's a hard question. You almost have to, if you get on the, I think I put the website at the end of my last slide.
National.
It's up there.
Is it? Okay, yeah. So you can go to that site and look it up, and it has the states. So if this is a big deal to you, you could send some money to Michigan because they're on the verge, and I don't know how many. I think they got 20-some electoral votes. If you get the right states to do it, we're just right there. And but we need like 3 or 4 more, 5 more states, and if they pass it, we can get the national.
Has this been discussed in Nebraska at all?
Things like this get discussed.
Okay, so a little higher up than discussed.
Yeah, but they don't get, because I'm into ranked choice voting, we couldn't get anybody to bring a ranked choice voting bill the last session. And I talked to like 7 or 8 people. And I didn't want to, I knew I was limited on time, so I didn't want to get into it too deep, but where I was trying to really push hard the concept of cities being able to use ranked choice voting, because they do that in Utah. And I couldn't get any legislator to do that. It's like, isn't a conservative principle local control? Isn't a conservative principle that these states and villages and towns can do what they want to do? But I could not get anyone to bring that. McAllister he was our flag carrier on that thing, great, because he's a Republican. Bostar's not too bad now. He's done the open primaries thing last session. So I'm hoping that gets brought again. And we do this knowing we're going to lose. I guess we're planting trees and shades we won't sit in.
Yes.
We bring this stuff knowing that we'll probably lose on the legislative thing, but we get to have that session where we get to testify. Maybe the World Herald or one of the things picks up one of our quotes and says, and people look at that and go, well, that just makes sense. Why don't we do that? So I think we keep banging the drum and see where we can get with that. This is a big thing I took from the Democracy Summit, because it's a big deal when you're arguing with people about these things. Anywhere any of these things are implemented, open primaries, ranked choice voting, it doesn't change the character of your state. If you're a red state, you're still a red state. If you're a blue state, you're still a blue state. It doesn't, it's like some people think if you pass open primaries or you pass ranked choice voting, then all of a sudden we're all Democrats, In Massachusetts, the Democrats hate it and they're fighting it, So it's like whatever the party in power is or where the power is, they hate it because it's easy to manipulate, it's easy to control that 1/3 primary problem person. There's a guy named Torino, I haven't read his book yet, but he has a book out called Our Primary Problem. And it's a whole book on what this is all about. And then I hope I did all right on the time. This is kind of the end of it. But our shared values in regard to all these things to me is everybody should be heard. If you look at the Represent Us website, if you look at the one, you could Google like Jennifer Lawrence Represent Us, and she does a thing that shows that any bill that is ever offered has a 33% chance of passing. If it has a 60% plus support by the public, it has a 33% chance of passing. If it has the support of the money people, then it goes up to 66%. So, do we matter? I keep saying that over and over, but I think this makes us matter. So we want voters to have more power. We have accountability. The person who's told me not to disclose his name that's working with me said, I'm so tired of effing cultural war issues in our legislature right now, and this person's a Republican. And I think that stuff goes away with these systems, you know? And I don't know why that, I won't say that, don't want to get in trouble. Okay, so we have more competition. We told you we can have younger people coming in, we can have women and minorities, and we can throw more people in the pot. I think that gives more freedom to everybody. And we elect people with the best ideas, not the best connections. We elect people who can get out and say, this is what I stand for. Again, I keep referring back to the American Democracy Summit. We were able to hear from a guy who worked with, is it Macron in France?
Yeah.
They literally knocked on every door in France, and they didn't even try to pontificate to them when he got elected. They said, can you give us your top 5 major issues? And they went to every door in France, they figured out the top 5 major issues, and then that was their campaign. These are your major issues, we're gonna work top to bottom. With that 33% thing, it's not our issues, it's somebody else's issues. You know, why does Amazon not pay any tax? Why does Exxon not pay any tax? You know, a lot of good things could happen if maybe those changes would occur. And it gives common people a voice. It gives the person driving a 15-year-old car and the person who gets up every morning and is having troubles figuring out what they're going to do because the sitter said they're sick. You know, it gives those people a voice. So that's all I have, I think. Yep, that's it. End of slideshow. So I don't know how much time I have.